We're going to go through a cable Zercher Jefferson curl. So for this, I've got my cable machine. I've got the cable set up at the bottom and I've attached a straight bar attachment here. Now, before we begin, this is a particular exercise in which you can play with the setup. So I'm going to demonstrate this exercise standing, but this can be done seated. You could even change the height of the cable machine to change the force at which the cable machine is pulling you when you perform the exercise. Okay, so for this exercise, what I want to do is squat down and then get my arms into that Zercher position. So I'm resting the straight bar in my elbows. And then from here, I can choose whether to have the hands together or in this position, whatever feels best for me. Then I'm going to stand up. And then from here, in terms of what I do with my legs, it's either I can have the legs locked out, so knees locked out, or I can put a slight bend into my knees. What's important though is with this exercise, I want it to be focused on spinal motion. So I don't want to follow through all the way with the exercise. I start to fold with my pelvis and load my hamstrings and so forth. So as you go through this, I want you to also pay attention. Think that pelvis and everything from below is as still as possible. So I begin by segmentally flexing, starting from the neck. So I slowly work my way down, vertebrae by vertebrae. And as I perform this exercise, I'm working with a slow, steady pace, a pace which is controlled and slow enough for me to pay attention to segments as I'm working through each individual segment of the spine. And I'm working my way to my perceived end. As I mentioned before, as you're slowly lowering yourself down, try not to tilt with the pelvis. And then after I get to my end, I'm going to do the same, slowly extend vertebrae by vertebrae. So starting with the lower back, working my way slowly up. A few more details as you go through the motion, depending on what intensity you've got the cable machine at, what effort you're working at. You may be able to tune in to the sensations you're feeling as you move into position. So as I begin to flex the spine, I'm trying to make that mind joint connection of what I'm feeling. What can I feel in the nearby joints that are segmenting and flexing? Can I feel the connective tissues, the muscles nearby? How do they feel? Do they feel strong? Are they being engaged? Are they being stretched? All these details will help give me information on how I'm performing with this exercise. And the same, when I get to the bottom and I slowly extend from my lower back, I'm trying to pay attention to details in terms of how well can I reverse this movement? How capable do I feel as well? So that is an example of a Zercher Jefferson curl with a cable machine. Just to recap, this is an exercise that can be performed seated. You can play with the heights of how you set this cable machine so it pulls you in different directions. You can adjust the variable of how much weight you put on here as well. As I demonstrated with this particular exercise, we want to focus on spinal motion. So as I was going through it, I was being mindful not to go so far as to then begin to fold with the pelvis to gain that extra range of motion. This was more of an isolated variation in which we're just focusing on spinal motion.